Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Soffra, founder of Wow Women Group. Welcome to my Wow podcast, Success Circles, where success leaves clues. Today I'm speaking to the incredibly successful Glen Carlson. Glen is an award-winning entrepreneur and co-founder of Australia's 9th fastest growing company, Dent. Founded in 2010, Dent Global is an international world-leading business accelerator, best known for their award-winning program, Key Person of Influence. This program produces entrepreneurs that stand out, scale up, and make an impact in the world. Dent has also launched 3 best-selling books on business, won major awards, and raised more than $500,000 to charities around the globe. In the last 7 years, Dent Global has expanded to the UK, USA, Singapore, and Australia. They've published over 800 books for their clients and built an epic full-time team of 50 across 12 time zones. With 3 acquisitions under their belt in the technology, media, and publishing, Dent has become a one-stop shop for business owners that want to accelerate their entrepreneurial journey. Glen's been featured in Inc.com, The Fin Review, Sky Business News, Entrepreneurs.com, and his Dent podcast is consistently in the top 100 business podcasts in Australia. And people watch over 2,000 or have watched over 2,000 hours of Glen's business tips on his Facebook page each week. Welcome, Glen. Lovely to have you and have a chat with you today. So, as I say, thank you so much for saying yes. So appreciative of your time. I wanted to start off by, obviously, you've got a great presence online, and I've seen so much in terms of KPI. I've read the book. I've got the newer version. I've spoken to numerous people. I've spoken to some of the people that have come through the program. So I love KPI, and I obviously get, listen to your podcast and so on. But I want to ask about Glen. So, young Glen, what was your passion when you were young? What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you end up, are you where you thought you'd be?
I didn't think like that when I was a kid. I grew up on a boat. So when my dad was in his early 30s, so my dad was a shipwright in the Navy. So he built boats, joined as an apprenticeship when he was 15, met mum's a hairdresser. So a fairly typical, everyday kind of family, I guess. And one day my dad was talking to my mum's mum, my nana. She's passed now, but and he kind of said, I feel like something's missing in the world, and like family's good, all that's good, work's all right, but like something's missing. And my nana said to him, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And he was like, never been asked a question like that before. He was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, right? It's kind of not how they operate. And he thought about it and he went, if I wasn't afraid, I'd take my family and I'd sail around the world on an epic adventure. And she just raised an eyebrow. And in Dad's mind, that was like, done, decision made. So within a couple of years, he retired on a full pension at, I think it was 35 or something like that. So 25 years in the Navy. Does that math work? 20 years, whatever it is. And he built our boat because that's what he did. It was a 40-foot sloop, so a single-masted boat about the same size as a good-sized caravan that you might travel around the country in. And we set off. And so from my age, from 6 to 14, I was floating around on a boat. And in that time, ironically, all I wanted to do was be back at high school because I watched Saved by the Bell and they had these lockers and Screech and, all I wanted was that because the thing I lacked was, friendship, I suppose. You'd meet people, but you're always moving on to the next port or the next adventure. And while there's great, photos, and I remember have experiences of, the pyramids and, the Panama Canal and the Twin Towers in New York and all these kind of wild places that we went. Yeah, for me, it was this kind of connection that I felt like I was lacking. And I always saw these shows like Saved by the Bell, and I'm like, wow, getting locked in a locker. That looks awesome. So that was kind of my dream when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, everything is based on or what we want out of life is based on where we're at and what age we're at, right? So you're probably, I'm listening to you, and I'm at an age where I'm appreciating, oh my God, imagine being on a boat all of those years. That's amazing, and all the sights and the sounds and all of that.
Oh,
But
it's totally wild.
yeah, yeah,
Totally wild. Totally shifted my perspective. I didn't know this until later, right? But
you
totally
never do,
shifted my
right?
perspective. Totally shifted my perspective of the world, for sure.
Yeah, but at that age, you wanted that other stuff, that young kid
Yeah,
stuff, you know.
totally. And look, maybe more to your question. We came back, and I was in high school up on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and I really experienced my family, or my parents, have to, for the first time in my experience, struggle with money, because all of a sudden you got to, school and houses and mortgages and stuff, right? And dad had to go back to hard work as opposed to, being the captain of our ship for, almost a decade. And that kind of, that energy, I guess it was like a tension, made, or I guess resolved in my mind the idea that money was important, and I needed to work out how to master money. And I was working at McDonald's because I'm like, I'll make money here. And very quickly worked out that how you make money is important. And for me, working at McDonald's after sailing the planet was not something that was jiving for me. And so I was politely, by my McDonald's manager, asked to leave after about 6 months, which I did.
They did you
And
a favor.
yeah, well, and I started a small business cleaning boats. And that was my first sort of foray into being able to earn a living on my own terms, I suppose. And so I haven't looked back. And so, yeah, it was those early days of needing to resolve the tension around money, not wanting to work for the man, so to speak. That I
How
guess
old were you, Glenn, at that point?
13, 14. So
I find that fascinating, because you mentioned key things that I love, and which is my passion. And I was on a webinar last night talking about money mastery, because that's what I do. So you've mentioned mastering money, and you've mentioned working for the man and all that sort of stuff. And I also talk very heavily around what did it feel like, what was your money story at home. But it's fascinating to me that at the age of 13, you came to that realization on your own. That's very rare, to be quite honest.
maybe not totally on my own. I didn't have any mentors, but when I came home from, I remember this, when I came home from McDonald's and said, I kind of quit. I saw this glimmer of pride in my dad's eye, to be honest. And he just kind of said, the only way you'll ever make money is fixing something for someone. Right now, his world was physical fixing things. And I took that reasonably literally, because I started a boat cleaning business. I got my scuba diving license. I was doing underwater search and recovery. Dad would go in and fill the bottles before I was 15, because legally I couldn't do that. And then once I was over 15, I could do it. And so I was cleaning boats, and so essentially that's me fixing something for someone, because a lot of the boats there were racing boats, and if they've got a dirty hull, that slows them down in the water. So I'd jump in with my scuba gear, clean their hull, and fix the problem of a slow boat. So now I don't really do physical labor or things, but at the same time, I've still found it to be very true that the only way I earn the right to make money, to earn a living, is by fixing things for people. Now we've just evolved into helping fix their businesses, which is, no more complicated than fixing a boat. Really, it's just a different vehicle. And I guess for me that set the tone, is that, and maybe it was growing up on a boat, maybe it was my dad as a captain, maybe it was this kind of inbuilt experience of, when something goes wrong on a boat, you fix it. If you don't like where you are, you move. If things aren't working, it's your fault. So there's this very pragmatic approach to life on a boat. No one's going to come and save you or fix you or rescue you or what have you. You need to really take, ownership I suppose, of the responsibility of a vehicle like that. And so I really don't think business is that different from that allegory, I guess you could say. And so I guess for me, getting into business and having that responsibility was almost like my apprenticeship under on a boat or something. It was like, oh, okay, I'm in control of my own little boat now, and away I go. And so while my dad wasn't and still isn't an entrepreneur or a business leader, nor is my mum, I think entrepreneurship has more to do with the spirit and the energy and the integrity and the ownership. And I think I definitely got that in spades from my upbringing.
I can, when you're talking like that, I can see the connection, and it's so strong, that connection that you speak about, taking ultimate responsibility. No one's going to save you; it's you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that in itself is, I guess, the true spirit of entrepreneurship, if you like. So,
Well, I'd like to say it's the true spirit of life.
well, of course, of course. I'm looking at it from your journey. So take that journey to the physical fixing, to the business fixing. Tell me how you went from there to KPI. What were the frustrations? Because a lot of the time we create things out of frustration. What was the journey?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell me that story from that point to creating KPI?
Sure. So after high school, my now business partner and then business partner, well, we became business partners, Daniel, we were mates from high school. And both of us were very fixated on this idea of making money, right? For different reasons, but the same goal, got to make money. And I had my successful boat cleaning business, but I knew I wanted to get out of that. And we were both advised that sales and marketing is a good idea, right? If you know how to market stuff and you know how to sell stuff, and certainly advice to a young kid, I think that's very good advice. Like if you can learn how to sell, especially, you radically improve your earning potential, and you earn the right. It's like level one for business and entrepreneurship, because if you can't sell, like there's no point starting a business if you have any kind of qualms about being able to get in front of someone and communicate, value, essentially. So we both started working for an events marketing company that would promote speakers and gurus. And within about 9 to 12 months of doing that, there were some elements of the way they were doing what they were doing that we felt we could do better. The naivety of youth, or perhaps it's the hubris of youth. But anyway, Dan and I decided to go off and start our own business, not quite in competition, but certainly of a similar format. And it proved successful. So we were promoting speakers, and one of the things that we felt like authors, speakers, commentators, things of this nature, in all sorts of different areas, business owners, investment gurus. We weren't particularly picky because, again, our focus was just make the money, but do it with some integrity, and that was important from us from the start. And we did that, and it became successful. And very quickly we realized it was far easier to promote a person than it was to directly try and promote a product or a service, right? Because people buy from people.
Oh.
More importantly, we buy from people we know, like and trust. And so what we found back then, and this is 15 years, this is 2001, 2002, that if we promoted the founder of a business, and then they promoted the product or the service, we'd sell a hell of a lot more of the product or service than if we were just promoting the product or service sort of directly. So we grew quick. We grew up to about 10 million revenue in year 3. So we're 24 years old. We're making all this money. We ticked that money box. We expanded to the UK, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sort of a short story long, we got to the point where we're a bit disenfranchised. Frankly, we're a bit burnt out. We're a bit over it. We were making money, and we'd start to discover that there wasn't this, the word that comes to mind now is meaning or fulfillment. At the time, we didn't really have the language for it, but there was very much a void. Both Dan and I read Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks of this. And for those that may not know, it's the story of a Jewish psychiatrist that was imprisoned in Auschwitz, and it's his story of survival, essentially. But the bottom line comes down to those that survived had a reason, they had a meaning, they had a purpose beyond the atrocious circumstances that they found themselves in. And he referred to it as this existential vacuum, that if you had this existential vacuum or this hole in your soul, you could feel it. Like it was like you didn't have an arm, but maybe, when you were young, you didn't realize that you were meant to have something there. But as you start to grow older and experience the external things in the world and discover that those external things don't satisfy the soul to the degree that we seek, or we seem to be seeking, we start to become aware of this missing thing right about here. I'm pointing to my chest.
I love the way you explain that.
And so we started really considering how to fix that problem. Now, this all sounds like we're like proper Buddhas sitting down with our legs crossed with some intentionality in that. It wasn't the case. It was more that we just had the shits with our business. It wasn't fueling us. It wasn't fun anymore. So 95% of it, maybe 99% of it was just stress, frustration, burnout over it. And there was this 1% trying to creep in that we couldn't articulate at the time, but was very much trying to push us in the direction of meaning, bottom line. And we tried to sell the business. This is our previous business. And again, a long story short, we couldn't. It wasn't worth anything. And the advisor that was helping us sell the business looked at what we'd been doing for the last 7 years and kind of quizzically scratched his head and said, the problem is you've got no intrinsic value in the business. You're essentially a brokerage model. You've been working with all your clients and developing them and helping them build their businesses so you could promote them. They've gone on to become very successful, but you haven't applied any of those same principles to your own business. And so you're left with a shell of an organization that, while has been producing revenue, has a great track record, a great brand, a great team, all that stuff, it really is an empty shell of a business, which was a pretty fundamental kick in the guts. We thought we'd kind of mastered the business game. We were these young little hot shots doing the do. And we thought we knew the game of business. And, really the true judgment is the true value of what you build. Is your value, have you created value that can be perceived by others as valuable? No point thinking you can build a house if no one else wants to live in it, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah.
So all of those things were kind of conflagrating. There's a word in there somewhere. Coming together all at the same time. And again, fuzzy couple of years in between all that. But what we realized is that we had been developing for almost a decade a lot of intellectual property around how to promote speakers and develop a business around a speaker, right? Like a guru type person. And the reason we'd missed a lot of that doing it on ourselves is we didn't want to be speakers or gurus. That was not our intention. We wanted to build a business that ultimately made an impact. We realized that's what we wanted to do. We looked at these people like, the Richard Bransons of the world and now the Elon Musks and all those kind of people that are like up to something. They're doing something. They're on a mission. And we're like, yes, that. Like, I look at Brene Brown. I look at Sheryl Sandberg. I look at Oprah. I look at these people that are up to something, and to me, that just speaks of that's my tribe. They're my people, and they're the people that we always kind of felt were the leaders in this. Maybe it's a movement, maybe it's not, but of doing something and making great money at it that's meaningful, that's purposeful, that really serves people in a powerful way. So, we'd missed all of this value that we had because we just saw what we did as promoting gurus. But this same advisor pointed out and go, well, have you ever considered just applying those same principles to business in general, even if the person doesn't want to be like a mega guru? And to be fair, we hadn't. And so we tried it. We got a small group of people from within our community. We put together a small little course around what we knew was important to build influence. You need to have a great pitch. You need to have some published content. You need to have scalable products. You need to have a good profile because people are skeptical. They're going to Google you. It's important that the right things come up. And you need to do partnerships. Now, again, this sounds like we had it all clear from the very start. No, it kind of had to be pieced together. But when we took the time to kind of look at what was it that we actually did to help our clients become successful, that those sort of key areas materialized. And so when we found a few business owners that were already really good at what they did, we found a great fitness trainer that had worked with clients to get them on the cover of Men's Health magazine type thing. Like these were people that were good at what they do, but majorly undervalued, like struggling to bring in the next sale, not making good money, woefully underpaid for their expertise. And we spent about 6 months working with them on developing these 5 elements of influence: their pitch, publish, product, profile, and partnerships. And I mean, the results that we saw were radical. Lazo, the fitness trainer, the very first fitness trainer we've ever worked with, we've worked with many now, went from earning £50,000 a year, because it was back in London, to £500,000 a year in 9 months. Like, bang, he just became that guy very, very quickly in his industry. And we similar track record with accountants or lawyers or real estate agents, like any sort of traditional service business. And that's where we really found our niche, right? Because at the time there was a lot of stuff happening in Silicon Valley. Tech was the emerging, new darling of conversation. And everyone's talking about these tech startups, and there was the bubble and all that kind of stuff. And we were like, no, they're not our people. While we love that world, and that's an exciting direction the world's going in, our people were the people like us, which were the service providers, the people that had a skill set that could help other people, but were often bogged down in the delivery of it. And so that was the very early beginnings of what eventually became, almost a decade later now, and we've been running it in 6 different countries around the world, that the Key Person of Influence program. And it's a program. It's a structured process over 12 months where we work with, established founders of businesses and leaders, small businesses. There could be consultants, just working for themselves, all the way up to a physio with 15 on their team or something like that. And we've really specialized in helping ordinary business owners become recognized as the go-to brand in their industry, the leader in their field. And there's a process for doing it. If someone's already established value, there is a predictable process for doing it. It's not luck. It's not charisma. It's not because you've got an extroverted personality. None of those things are required, and often they can work against you. And so, that's what we've been doing. And that's kind of the genesis of, a process that's produced over 3,000 alumni now. We've produced almost 1,000 business authors. Out of that, hundreds of millions in media exposure. It's tough to measure that, but easily, like lots and lots of exposure. But it's funny, the thing we find is, without question, the fastest way to create a breakthrough in your business or your career is to become recognized as the go-to brand in your industry. That just solves so many problems. It solves the problem of attracting clients, attracting team, attracting media, attracting partners, attracting the support you need. And most people are so focused on just delivering value to customers, which is the ticket to the game. They haven't taken the time to kind of work out, how do we start to build some influence around this value so we can create an organization that doesn't just serve them as the owner, doesn't just serve their customers, but can get to a level of profitability, stability, predictability, that they can then focus their mind on the impact that they want to have. And that's kind of how we brought it all around full circle and built a business that not only is a meaningful company for us to run, but helps other business owners build meaningful businesses as well. And like a little meaning sandwich, which is kind of happy.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because that has helped you find your purpose And I'm sensing that you filled that hole.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I filled two
For now.
holes. Filled
Yeah.
two holes. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, certainly. I mean, the first hole was when I was a kid was a lack of community. And the second hole through my 20s had the money, but there was a lack of meaning or a sense of purpose. And so now we've kind of built, not intentionally, because the program, this process we've developed works, right? It produces influences consistently and reliably. Organically around that, this hyper-engaged community of alumni that are the speakers, the authors, the TED talkers, the commentators, the award winners. Like, I mean, in Australia alone, we've produced 11 TEDx speakers. We've produced numerous, what is it? The 100 Women of Influence. I think it's Westpac and the Fin Review or something.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fin Review.
5 of those, numerous Telstra Business Women of the Year awards. Like this process like really works. And so for me, that community, that camaraderie, given then each and every one of those, because part of the criteria of us even working with someone is that they're not just here to make money or build a business, that they actually want to build a business that aligns with a higher purpose or a higher goal, that is in some way a force for good in the world. Richard Branson said that business can and must be a force for good in the world, and that is in fact good for business, that doing good is good for business. And when we first heard him say that, we said, yes, that is the most precise articulation of what we want to stand for than anything else we've come across. That business can and must be a force for good in the world, and that is good for business. And that is the DNA, that is the core central moving idea that our community has built itself around. Because we don't really give a shit about producing key people of influence. Like, who cares? So you're an author, so you're more influential, so you've got a more successful business. Like, so what? And for us, we recognize that the world needs a little bit of help. It's probably not going to be governments or corporate or well-meaning do-gooders that are struggling to pay their rego. And again, no disrespect to wherever anyone's at in their journey, but it's the business owners. It's us. It's you. It's me. And individually, we can not do very much. We might not be able to write a check for $1 billion like Zuckerberg or Warren Buffett can. We might only be able to give a small percentage, maybe 1% of our revenue. Everyone can afford 1%. But if 1 million small businesses or 10 million small businesses around the world suddenly start aligning to this idea of that, maybe it's a responsibility or maybe it's just a nobility to be able to build something that serves others, and as a byproduct of that service also helps the world. I mean, individually we can do so little, but together we can do so much. I forget who said that quote, but that's kind of how we feel. So there's been this community, there's been this purpose that's all sort of wrapped itself around this little program that we've been running for sort of 9 years. And yeah, it's bizarre how the voids of one's life drive the values. I think I learned that from a guy called John DeMartini, and that's certainly what's happened.
So
here.
purpose building purpose, and that is exactly what you're talking about with Richard Branson. It makes so much sense, but also you're talking about individually, and I was saying last night on the webinar, there are times when I personally get overwhelmed with what the future holds and my passion around empowering this financial freedom piece. And I think to myself, and when I talk about overwhelm, I mean, how is this ever going to change? It's so much bigger than myself. But what gives me comfort is when I focus back into myself and know that if I alone am doing the thing that I can do, and you, Glenn, are doing the thing that you can do collectively. So I guess I'm reiterating what you just said. If we can individually take responsibility and step up, collectively we can have a major impact, right? So I love what you're saying that.
Was it Gandhi that said you got to be the change you want to see in the world?
I think it was him. Absolutely.
I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson as well. He's kind of exploded in the last 5 years on the scene. And and he has a go at a lot of these kind of young militant, revolutionary type people that want to rip down the system and the world is broken and blah blah blah. And yet their personal economics are in disarray, their personal values are in disarray. And his argument is, look, if you can't make your own bed, how can you reconstruct the world? Or if you can't keep your own house in order, how can you have an impact? Or how can you think you can have an impact in that around you? So that's why, while we want to make an impact, we want to make a dent in the universe, at some point you got to get practical. At some point, you got to come back and go, right, how do I sell some stuff that's going to, help some people achieve an outcome and get paid? I mean, we work with trucking companies. We work with, payroll businesses, and often, if someone's listening to this thinking, well, that all sounds well and good and pretty lofty and kumbaya and idealistic, it really is incredible. Like I think of brands like Tom's, for example, the shoes. They're a cheap little pair of sort of beach shoes that you'd put on. And yet, because they align themselves to this idea of for every pair of shoes you buy, we're going to give a pair of shoes to a child in need, that reputation exploded. And, I think they sold their company for $500 million. A shitty little shoe becomes a transformational brand. And
but what did they stand for?
Well, I think they stood for. I think they stood for conscious consumption. Yeah, they stood for. The point is, they stood for something.
Yes.
Right, and I think one of the things that we find when we're working with our clients, and we've certainly found in our business, because at our core, we're a business coaching company, business advisory. No different to like a KPMG, which is like the evil empire of boring corporate. There's many business coaches that are like, more money, more profit, more this, more that. And it's like, And I really think one of the things that's allowed us to fundamentally differentiate ourselves into a different league from that has not been the fact that, we can help our clients transform better and faster. While that's true, I think the real impact has come from, that meaningful purpose and vision.
And so I have this argument or this disagreement, because I'm accounting, financial planning, right? So we're talking about KPI and you work with trucking companies and you work with personal trainers and people across the board. And so the argument is, look, we don't sell, and how could that be of any benefit to us? We're just in the do. What would be your response to, and you know what I'm talking about, Glenn? Have you had this sort of feedback from that type of industry? And what would you say to them?
So what I get a lot of, and it's not industry specific, we get a lot of people going, I don't want to be the front guy. I don't want the limelight. I don't want to be a shameless self-promoter. I don't want to be a guru. I just want to build a business that works without me. Right. So they've read the E-Myth or something along those lines, and it's all about systems and processes and all that sort of stuff.
Tell me what you think about that. Just there. Tell me what you think about that.
Yeah. So what I think about that is it rarely works well. It's a very inefficient way to build success, because look at Michael Gerber of the E-Myth. Right. His entire book is selling people on the idea that they need to build systems and processes. And yet, how did he build a successful business? Well, he became a key person of influence in his industry. He was visible, he was valuable, and he was connected. So a few things that I say about it. First, while it's very important that a business understands and learns how to generate attention for itself, it can't become an attention seeker. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people misunderstand, is that leading from the front isn't about attention seeking. It's about taking responsibility. And I believe that every business owner is obligated, in the same way a captain of a ship is obligated, to take responsibility for that ship, to lead from the front. I believe it's the role of every business owner to lead from the front and do a few things. The first is to be better than anybody else in the world at communicating the vision of that organization and what it's here to do and why. At a tactical level, serving clients, but also its larger purpose in the commercial ecosystem. The next thing I think that person needs to do better than anybody else in the world is communicate the values of the organization. So how it is going to show up, who the people in that organization are going to be in the achievement of that vision. And finally, I believe that that person needs to be better than anybody else in the world at communicating the value proposition of the organization, right? At the tactical, why should I spend money with you instead of your competition? For example, vision, the values, and the value proposition. We run a whole document on this. It's called the V3, right? It's mapping your vision, your values, and your value proposition. And it's my assertion that the great leaders in the world, the influencers in the world, they do those three things very well. Whether they're Brené Brown, she's very good at communicating the vision, the values, the value proposition of her work. Whether it's Warren Buffett, an introvert, communicating the vision, the values, the value proposition of his work. Even Richard Branson's an introvert. You know, he can't speak to an audience. He has to be interviewed side on. He can hang upside down out of a helicopter, but that's a very different thing. He has just taken responsibility for being the vision, the values, and value proposition. The mistake I think that people make often on the journey of like personal branding or something is even that term personal branding creates a damaging heuristic where people think it's this veneer that they've got to make of themselves. And the mistake that people make is they make themselves the hero of their own story. And that is a huge mistake. Real influencers, the real key people of influence, the real leaders of our time don't make themselves the hero. They make the purpose the hero, or the mission the hero, or their team the hero. And that's the key. If you think of Oprah, right, you never consider Oprah as a shameless self-promoter, and yet she's hyper popular because it's never about Oprah. Jamie Oliver, same deal. He's ubiquitous. He's everywhere, but everyone seems to love the guy, right? Because there's these lovely jubbly, all about the food. It's not about him. He's just the messenger. He's just the conduit. Instead of being in the spotlight, he's shining the spotlight. And I think when business owners of any business in any industry come out from the back room and get uncomfortable, and I get that it's uncomfortable, but get uncomfortable and embody the vision, the values, the value proposition, and become the future-focused, purpose-driven value creator that all key people of influence, that all leaders are. Certainly in my experience, and certainly in the experience of the people that we work with to help develop them in that way, while that might be one of the more uncomfortable transitions to leadership that they experience, it's certainly one of the more fulfilling journeys that I think a person can go on, because not everyone can go on that journey. Not everyone's built for it. But for those that are, that don't do, there is no escaping that existential vacuum. And so at some point, we need to decide in this life of ours, are we going to show up or not?
And I think incredible points that you make, and I purposely don't interrupt because it's so much gold coming out. And I think that when I spoke about the people that are not in tune with the way of thinking, I think they're working on the old model. The world has changed so much. What an accountant was 20 years ago to what an accountant or financial planner is today, completely different. So I get a sense that the profession, or certain individuals in the profession, have not, I guess, accepted or embodied or see the vision of the future of what the profession should do. So again, not make themselves the hero, but put the passion or the purpose in front, or shine the spotlight on the message, if you like. I have a clear message. So what would you say to me in terms of, and I love the personal branding piece where you said it's kind of, it does, the term personal branding doesn't really help does it? No. And
No,
it's
it's like it's like a shop front. It's like, oh, you got to work on you. It's to me, the idea of I'm working on my personal brand is I'm working on my window dressing.
Yeah, see, I love the way you put that. And when you say that, like it takes a different perspective for your mind to go, oh God, I didn't think of it like that.
And that's why most people avoid leading from the front, taking responsibility and doing what's necessary to build an organization that shows up as visible, valuable, and connected, is because they have this, it's not even a fear, it's a distaste
Exactly.
for that self-promotional, attention-seeking caricature. And yet, that is not influence. We're not attracted to those people. We're not inspired by those people. So it's a cunning little error in perception that, like the little subtle shifts in a train track, it's only got to kind of move an inch, and it takes you from one set of tracks to another set of tracks that can take you off in a very different direction. And so I'm on a bit of a mission to kind of help people realize, holy shit, yeah, I've been on the wrong track. So I've had that mindset. I need to take some responsibility. I need to lean in a little bit. And you know what? Deep down, buried down, locked in a box, in a box in a box, there's this desire, there's this calling, there's this subtle little tap, tap, tap of the call to adventure. And I want to help people open that box, not through personal development or patting them on the back and telling them it's a great day, let's go, but helping them build the vehicle to actually do it.
To speak your purpose.
And so, coming back to your question before, how do you kind of break out of it? Well, in Dent with our clients, we also run what's called the Dent operating system. So it's a way of running our business day to day, week to week, month to month. It creates a tempo. It creates reflection and accountability. It's very metric driven, but it keeps us focused and it keeps us on track. And we have this thing called the quarterly, where every quarter we reflect on the previous quarter and reset ourselves for the next quarter. And everything's documented on a single page, and it takes us all the way to a big 10-year moonshot. But when we bring it down tactically, one of the things that we do every quarter is essentially we run a little exercise around disrupting ourselves. So I'll ask myself the question, if I was to put a CEO in charge of my business and I was to completely leave, and it was my singular mission to put my company out of business, what would I do? How would I do it? And I would look at the trends, and I would look at what's happening in the world, and I would look at other industries that are being disrupted and what's causing the disruption. And I would try and work out what would be the widget or the product or the service or the offering or the way that I would go about putting the old company that I've just walked away from out of business. And we do that as a team. And everyone goes away and we all come back, and essentially we assault our own company. And that forces one to reflect on some very hard truths. And we use examples like Kodak, who had the digital camera in their basement, the first of its kind, and they missed it, right? Because they thought they were in the chemical and the paper business. That was their $100 billion a year business. They didn't realize that what their customers really wanted was easy access to memories. And they didn't understand the trends of Moore's law, that the processing power and cost of said processing power was going to, halve every year or so, transforming this thing that they didn't see had any value into a game changer. Had they run a quarterly disruption meeting, had they invited all of their team to try and, assault the business, they may have discovered that. And I think if, accountants or lawyers or frankly, any white collared role, needs to, well, frankly, any role, but especially white collar, is going to be under a lot of pressure from machine learning, artificial intelligence,
Absolutely.
big data over the next 15 years. Right? I don't think it's in the next 3 years, but it's definitely in the next 15 years. I mean, and people might not know this, but this was IBM with Watson. Watson's their AI bot. They uploaded something like 3 million brain scans, full 3D mapped brain scans. Didn't tell it anything, just uploaded it. Asked it a few questions to identify any anomalies. And Watson, the machine, was something like 80% more effective at identifying brain tumors than a panel of America's leading neurologists. And at no point did they ever teach the machine how to identify the tumor or what a tumor was. They did none of that. They just asked this data set, essentially, some questions. This is the world we live in. We live in a world where the Turing test 5 years ago was completely dismantled, where the Turing test, for, again, those that don't know, is the inability to tell the difference between whether or not you're talking to a machine or a human. So the idea is you'd be in one room and you'd be communicating to someone or something in another room, and you'd have this conversation and you'd say whether or not you're talking to a human or whether you're talking to a machine. Do that enough times, and it gets to the point where when you can't tell the difference between each, it passes the so-called Turing test. So that was dismantled about 5 years ago. And you're now hearing, all of the airport that used to be a human calling it out. It's now a machine. All of the things that you're talking to on the phone, Siri, etc. All of these combining, accelerating technologies are coming together faster than ever. And they're invisible for most people at the moment because they're not practical. It's like no one gave a shit about Facebook when the main feature release was a poke. What did a lawyer care about Facebook 10 years ago? Well, I tell you, they care about it today. It's become a tool. And so these things creep up on us. And what that's going to do is it's going to make any functional work, as in physical work through robotics, irrelevant or not valued, right? Very, very, very cheap. But it's also going to make functional thinking work very low value. For a lawyer to think that it requires a human to be able to benchmark and categorize all case law and match it against a particular circumstance is crazy. If a machine can learn how to identify a brain tumor, a machine can learn to identify opportunities in a legal process, for example, or threats in a legal process. So this is coming. And all functional work, all functional thinking is going to become commoditized, is going to become massively devalued over the next, call it 20 years. And so as far as I can see, the thing that, and most of the advanced leaders in this field, of which I am not one, but of the advanced leaders in this field, they all seem pretty convinced that there are a few realms that are safe from, these tools, if you will. And it's all around creativity, leadership. It's all around innovation. And it's all being able to take someone on a journey. And that is what key people of influence do. They're very good at that. They're far better at that, or they become far better at that than the functional work, which is why influencers are often spend a lot less time working in the business than they do on the business, because they've worked out how to be more valuable doing the things that you can't hire someone to do on Seek, like pitching or publishing thought leadership, or developing new products that add new value, et cetera, et cetera. So while there's I believe some very existential reasons why it makes sense to become a real leader and an influencer in your field, there are also some very, very pragmatic financial ones. So yeah, if you're listening in, I would consider if you were fired from your own business, even if it's just you, what, and your mandate was to put your old self out of business, your old company out of business, what would you do? And come back with the answers and take heed.
Challenging and maybe uncomfortable conversations with yourself, but from what you're telling me, absolutely essential in surviving and flourishing and creating more purpose. So you answered my last question, which was basically, how do you see the next 5 years in the entrepreneurial journey? And you've more or less answered that from the AI perspective. And so the value is going to be in the creation, in the vision, in the leadership, in the communication, in the, dare I say, the fluffy stuff, the human side. I mean, they can't replace the human side. And I hear this a lot in my profession, saying that, a computer can do that, but they can't have the relationship. They can't have the relationship with the client. And that's all well and good. So what are your thoughts around that?
I think people want relationships with their friends, not their accountants.
You think? Tell me a little bit more about that. So tell me from an accounting point of view. Tell me that.
Well, no, it's not accounting. It's any industry, including accounting.
Yep.
Like the idea that someone wants a relationship with their accountant is as ridiculous as this idea that I want to buy my accountant's time. Like, I don't want a relationship with my accountant. I want my finances to be, squared away. I want my tax to be minimized legally. I want my structure to be effective. I know I want my financial infrastructure and economic engine to be bomb-proof and watertight. That's what I want. Provide me with a sugar pill that gives me that outcome, and I will easily forego my relationship with my accountant in the exact same way people have foregone their relationships with vinyl. We're very happy to use Spotify now. We don't need vinyl. We don't need an 8-track, right? This romantic idea of a relationship. The relationship is not a relationship. No one cares. The relationship is just shorthand for trust, right? Right now, my accountant is the most expedient means to that end of, the integrity of my economic engine. So I want to trust that accountant. So what do humans trust? Well, okay, we trust people that we have a relationship with. And before Xero and before MyOb, people used to trust paper ledgers, right? And there's this big book, and that's where it all was, and that's where the trust was. And there was a period there where people are like, I wouldn't trust it to a machine.
Yes, I know. Thank you for bringing that up. And you're totally disrupting the way I'm thinking about this in terms of the trust with the professional. So having said
people want trust in an outcome. People want trust in an outcome. The moment there is a bot or a machine and there's some kid in a basement working it out right now, right? So, okay, let's just look at another industry. People right now don't trust driverless cars for no good reason, right? Millions of hours of driverless driving have proved without a shadow of statistical doubt that a driverless car is far, 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 far safer than a car driven by a human being. Human beings are irrational. We get distracted. We're inconsistent. And there's a myriad of things that can take us off our driving game. Machines have a singular focus, and they're very good at maintaining that focus 100% of the time, right? Very quickly, they will reach the tipping point where once your mate has a driverless car and once Ubers are driverless, it's not going to take very long until you will not put your kids in a car driven by a person.
Does that not blow your mind?
No, I've been thinking about this for long enough. It doesn't blow my mind anymore, but it did, and it should. And this is just where it's going. This doesn't blow my mind. This excites me. This is like, holy shit. Like, we're in wild times. So I promise you, at some point in the future, there's going to be a point where a machine can accept all of the necessary inputs from my financial position. It can run it against ATO tax law, which is quantified. It's binary. and can spit out solutions that will be 99.9% better, more effective, more legally expedient than a human can. And when my mate down the road starts using it and gets more tax back and is better structured for a couple of years in a row, that tipping point will tip so fast that the idea of trusting a human with mapping your complex financial structure against the almost infinite tax law will seem like an anachronism. It will seem like it would be no different than Microsoft saying that they're going to switch to a handwritten ledger system. It would just appear madness. And to try and hold on to this idea that people want a relationship with a human to do that, it's just super short-sighted.
That is just, that's again, it's blown my mind. So what's happening to these professions? What do you think they're going to do?
I think I'm an optimist, right?
I am too, but I love talking about the future. I'm a visual.
I'm an optimist. And if you look back at the history of technological acceleration and expansion, all new technology has ever done has created more opportunity, more abundance, and more wealth. We live in the wealthiest, most abundant time in human history against every single metric. There are some issues around, in our naivety, we have been accelerating our technology and energy production at the expense of natural resources that's inefficient and disastrous to our biosphere. But that, as well as moving towards, solar is moving towards grid parity and has achieved grid parity in 35 countries around the world now. I mean, we are moving to clean energy faster than ever before. So I'm an optimist, right? However, when the very first farmer in an area bought this newfangled thing called a tractor, and it was putting down the road, and all these other farmers were looking at it going, what an idiot, show pony, waste of money, etc. And all of a sudden, he was able to do the work of 100 farmhands by simply training one of those farmhands how to drive the thing and the other farmhand on how to connect the plow. All of a sudden, 98 farmhands needed to work out what the hell they were going to do to earn a living. The clever farmhands decided how to learn tractors, learn how to drive tractors or fix tractors or sell plows that connected to tractors, etc. Or get in the business of learning how to market tractors or in some way be involved in this new piece of technology. And I've got a 3-month-old daughter, and they say that in the first 3 years of life, humans learn more than they will ever learn in the rest of their life because of everything that we have to process. And that scares the shit out of old people, right? There's this paradigm of that as we get older, our brains become more inflexible. It's proven to be absolutely not true. Our brains remain plastic until our dying day. What ossifies is our mindset, not our actual biology or neurology. And we get fixed in our ways through habit and complacency. And from my perspective, I'm constantly trying to disrupt myself and learn the new thing. I'm not a coder. I'm not a technical engineer. I'm a sales and marketing guy, but I'm learning code. I'm not learning French. I'm learning code. Not a lot of code. I don't need to rebuild a computer, but I need to understand the basics because these are the building blocks that our world is built on. And frankly, it's not hard to learn. Learning code and the framework of all this technology is nowhere near as difficult as learning Mandarin. Right? Mandarin is really hard. Code's simple, and it's logical, so it doesn't have any of the human foibles of language, right? And so there's this decision that when one decides that they're on the Titanic and it's heading for an iceberg, it just requires a decision to turn. And, in all of these industries, the turning is a metaphor for learning. It's what do we need to learn to best navigate this future? And in my experience, the first thing to learn is how to lead from the front as a leader, as a key person of influence. So you're not bogged down financially or economically or just energetically in the functional. So step one, get yourself out of the functional. Step two, keep your eye on the future and put yourself in a community of people that are looking to reverse engineer that to work out how do we make the most of the times that we're in. And so that's my long answer to that.
So if anyone wants to check out this program, where can they go, Glen? The website?
They could Google my name, Google Glen Carlson and Dent. You could look. What you could do is this. I put together a little video that kind of summarizes a lot of the methodology around becoming a key person of influence. And it's easy to find. If you just go to Discover KPI, KPI stands for Key Person of Influence.com. So discoverkpi.com. There's a video you can watch and a little rabbit hole you can go down where you can do our digital scorecard, which will map your ability, or benchmark, I should say, your ability to influence against the 5 categories, giving you some real focus and clarity. Over 50,000 leaders around the world now use that to benchmark their influence. So that's kind of cool. And depending on where you are in the world, you can get access to a free copy of the Key Person of Influence book. If not free, a free PDF for sure. And if you like what we're putting down in all of those areas, well, it's pretty easy to reach out to one of my team through that process and say, hey, would love to have a chat to see if your business or your career or whatever it is ready for an acceleration process like this. And for the most part, it's really just about, do you have a track record in your space? Are you already good at what you do? Because we're an accelerator. We're not good with like, I've got no idea what I want to do with my life. I don't have any value. I'm an apprentice straight out of university. That we're not so good with. But for people that have been around the block in their industry, they've been punched in the face a couple of times. They know the difference between great work and terrible work. And they love to be the ones doing great work, but they feel undervalued and recognized for that. That's kind of our sweet spot.
And that's most people, I would say. Glen, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to personally re-listen to this because there's so much gold in there. Thank you so much. And it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. And if I could just say one final thing, maybe for someone that's tuning in, there's lots of tools, there's lots of strategies, there's lots of technologies, there's lots of information, and there's lots of opinions out there. There's no shortage of books. There's no shortage of seminars or courses or podcasts. It's not the information that's lacking. It's not the strategy that's lacking. All of those things exist in absolute abundance. What I would ask you to reflect on is not do you have the right tools and tech? It's, are you showing up? Are you showing up as the person that you could be, that you want to be, and that perhaps the world needs you to be? Because that's really what the world needs. It doesn't need more people with a business strategy. It needs more people wanting to show up and make a real dent in the universe. And so, Tracy, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the show and give me the opportunity to share some of my values, I suppose, with you and for your listeners. It's been a real treat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Glen.